she went on and to glory, and when she got there, she asked the Almighty, she said, but I thought you told me I had a long time to live. And he looked at it and he said, oh my gosh, please forgive me, I didn't even recognize you. At this time, we're going to introduce Mr. Larry Williams. Mr. Larry Williams, Emerald Coast Utility Authority, District 3. Mr. Williams.
They didn't tell me the dress code. And I prepared my notes because I'll tell you this story. This is a story about why I prepared my notes when I had, and he brought up San Diego, and every time he bring up San Diego, my eyes just light up. I grew up out there in San Diego when I joined the Navy, and so just the fondest of memories of San Diego. But when we were in Nusano, at the Nusano Hotel in Yokosuka, Japan, I had just bought one of them big old camcorders, and my children they were recording, and they were recording, and they said, and I was talking, you know, as I pontificate sometimes, and they would say, all right, we're going to go and take a break. And then they came back, and they had it such that I was still talking. So from then to now, whenever I start talking, I'm always thinking about my children, and they just say I talk so much. So I prepared my notes, so I'll stay in line and on time. I want to say first, good morning. First, giving honor to God, pastor of this great church, Pastor Riley. Recognize the leaders on this assembly, Doc, Derek, and the councilman, Delarian Wiggins, and the MC. And you, this esteemed group of individual men. The listening audience, as I understand, has been recorded, and the good people of District 3, who I serve. Bethel, AME, and I go back a little ways. I am trying to be on this mic. We've been attending church here for about 4 years. Not to mention they have one of the best senior programs in the area, and the person that does their audio is the same person I use to do my media commercials, so we have something in common. But what I wanted to know today was, Bethel, can we talk a little bit? Can we dialogue about the past, the present, and the future political leadership of the church and the community? I must say, I did not previously know all that I recently learned about the AME Church and her prominent position in Christendom. How the AME Church sought religious freedom before Emancipation Proclamation, and that many individuals who crave freedom are among her historic leadership or membership. According to AMEhistory.com, Bethel was established as the first church in 1794, with Richard Allen, among others, being installed as the pastor. And to this day, Bethel, AME, in Philadelphia is a one continuous piece of land that has always been owned by African Americans to this day. Richard Allen stressed social justice as the unifying force of the AME Church. In 1863, the Wilberforce University was reestablished by the AME Church, and all of this was done before Emancipation Proclamation. After the Civil War, we entered a period called Reconstruction. Now, I'm not going to talk enough about Reconstruction, but everything that I say has a reference to Reconstruction and the period from Reconstruction to Civil Rights. So there's a lot of details about what made us who we are. we'll say Reconstruction was and is a way to live in America, equal under the law. However, you should have known this was too good to be true, because we came out of being enslaved so excellently that it infuriated our fellow white Americans. The white majority of Americans used the ballot, discrimination, and terrorism to turn back the hands of time. And you can see this coming in various decisions from the court, legislation, and public opinion. Since Reconstruction ended in 1877, we as a people have been clawing our way back over the past 90 years towards the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. All I'll say about the first 250 years is that would be a discussion for reparations. Did I say Rosa Parks was a member of the local AME church? Well, she was, and we all know what she helped birth: the Montgomery boycott and the Civil Rights Movement. Montgomery boycott lasted for over a year, 381 days, and ended with a Supreme Court decision favoring the integration of the bus system. It was a major and overwhelming victory. The initial days led the masses into forming the Montgomery Improvement Association. This led to the election of a 26-year-old pastor that became the leader, and as we all know, the rest is history. This was also the start of the Civil Rights Movement. And the church has historically played a prophetic role in organizing voting rights and registration drives as a platform for political dialogue. The church has a rich history of community mobilization. It has the ability to rally congregations and allies to engage in political and peaceful protests and advocacy campaigns. By unifying communities, it empowers individuals to be vocal advocates for policies that promote racial equity, inclusion, and diversity. Church leaders can speak out with considerable authority about many situations. They can challenge unjust laws, promote and defend the rights of poor people through their examples and leadership. They can inspire, direct, and encourage their churches to take action to promote justice. Social justice is an extension of God's love and work in protecting and defending those who cannot defend themselves. Social justice as a civil rights term must include the following areas of consideration: criminal justice, economics, healthcare, education, and housing. I have often said, as a strategy, we, the church and the community, should choose an area to concentrate our combined efforts on and be relentless until the numbers equal the goals set. An example would be what Councilman Delarian just talked about. What do we want to have done with Baptist Hospital? That should be a clear goal in the leadership's mind, in the community's mind. And we should not stop until that goal is achieved. That's not something that may happen overnight, but we should not stop until that goal is achieved. How do we accomplish these types of strategic goals? First, with courage and persistence. There cannot be a week or day where somebody is not working or implementing the strategy. Organizing and planning. You plan to achieve your goals and you organize your team to do so. Tactics and strategy. This is where the art of war by Sun Tzu comes into play, particularly in direct and indirect methods. Like Malcolm and Martin, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Booker T. Washington. Sometimes you just have to be Frederick Douglass all by yourself. Vision and goals will drive the tactics and strategy. Remain flexible and fluid towards achieving the end goals. But we can't forget what James Brown said. It's a man's world. But it wouldn't be nothing without a woman and a girl. This is a hard truth, but many, if not most, of our families and communities go as the men go that live in them. I can tell you this firsthand, as many of you all know. And so I'm so glad to be here this morning with men who are concerned about the issues of their family and their community. Me being my daddy's son, knowing my grandfather, and having a son of my own, I cannot imagine not voting for 2 elections at any time. 2 elections, including a primary and a general election in the same year. Why, you say? Because policies are voted on in these United States that have a direct impact on our families' economic, social, and political freedom in this country. When we as men do not vote, we are giving others the authority to treat us and our families the way they see fit. How has that worked out in the past? Voting is a gateway to enter the political process. We vote as a means to hold people, politicians like myself, accountable for their policies, their proposals, and the votes they pass. So some have said their vote doesn't count. That statement couldn't be any further from the truth. There are many elections in this country, political and otherwise, that are decided by one vote, your vote. In 2017, up in the Virginia House of Delegates, there was the delegate won by one vote. Just this month, in the Marvin Harris Jr. Award for Best Receiver in the country, was decided by one vote. Many elections throughout America's history have been won by 1 or 2 votes per precinct. Your vote counts. Your vote equals your voice. Vote in every election, in every contest. Become a super voter. Why not be a modern man, a man for these times, who puts himself in a line to vote for his family, his community's interests? So in addition to why we're voting, we need to address who we're voting for. We need to know the politicians, especially local and state, and the policies they support. At every step of the way, we have the right to bring our voice into the discussion about what is best for our families and communities. So if we have learned anything from our history in America, it is that some folks don't want us to be their equal. We are equal to all, second to none. However, we still have to fight for our constitutional rights while others take them for granted. That's even okay. Victory is always sweeter for those who have some skin in the game, a vested interest in their success. I remember watching with my children the Eyes on the Prize series, which chronicled the civil rights movement. Those who have been beaten, spent time in jail, getting into some good trouble, and could say that they fought the battle and that the victory had been won, they were glad to tell their story. On the other hand, there was this one guy, I'll never forget him, there was this one guy who was an undercover brother, a spy, who would not look the camera in the eye and looked like he couldn't believe they found him, that they wanted him to retell that lie. He did not want to share his story. He was on the wrong side of the battle and was loser in the proverbial war. As we're gearing up for this upcoming political season, let's put on the whole armor of God. Get in the game, fight for our families and communities until the victory is won. How do I know we will win? We will win because we represent the margin of victory in most elections. And we vote for who best suits our interests. That is what makes our vote so important. Let's get ready to vote in the upcoming and every election in years to come, as if our life, our communities, and our families depend on it. I promised him that I would vote until I die, and I'm still on the battlefield for my Lord. My name is Larry Williams. I represent the good people of District 3 on the Emerald Coast Utility Authority Board, and I too need your vote in 2024. Thanks again for this opportunity to share my thoughts.
Did I tell you about the 2 deacons? There were 2 deacons, and one said to the other one, "Man, I bet you couldn't, I'll give you $50 if you tell me if you can say the 23rd Psalm." He said, "Oh man, that's no problem." He looked at the guy handed the $50 to a neutral party, looked at the guy, reared back, closed his eyes, and he said, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep, but if I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." The man looked at him just like you're looking at me. And he said to him, "Man, here's the $50. I didn't think you knew the whole thing." All right, here we go. You got it? Took a while. The next presenter is a son of a retired school principal. He was educated in the public school system here in Escambia County, graduating from my alma mater, Pensacola High School. He furthered his schooling by earning a bachelor's and an MBA degree. He's self-employed with a focus on real estate development and acquisitions. Presently serves as the Escambia Democratic Party chair. He is engaged in many civic organizations and is distinguished by his political party. He is distinguished by his political party. While here at Bethel AME Church, under the tutelage of the late Reverend W.E. McNeely, he heard this message as found in Matthew 25 and 35. "For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in." This became his guiding principle for the work that he do. I present to you Mr. Derek S. Scott.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure being with you all today. As Brother Nichols said, my name is Derek Scott, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chair for the Escambia Democratic Party here in Pensacola. Now, I was told to refrain from being a little too partisan in my address this morning, so I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but I'm going to try my best, but I'm going to pretend like I am anyway, and I'm just going to share my thoughts without saying that you should vote Democrat, and vote Democrat, right? So what I decided to do is share with you what's happening today and why it's important that we as black men become more engaged and lead this community so we aren't doomed to repeat the sins of the past. Here in Florida, if you haven't figured it out, black folks are under attack. If you've heard me speak before, then you know that I often say that we are 2 election cycles away from being back in slavery. Well, I'm going to amend that statement today and say that we're not 2 election cycles away, we're just 1 right now. So if you're not convinced by that, let's just take a look briefly at the state of Florida and where we are. The state currently has plans starting in the calendar 2024 that teach our children, those young gentlemen back here, that we benefited from being enslaved, right? If that's not enough, the Florida legislature is trying to severely limit and eventually take away your ability to vote. I'm glad I followed Mr. Williams, because I think what we're going to say is kind of in tandem in our message today. With our nationwide repeal on the Civil Rights Act of 1965, along with the failure of Congress to codify voting rights, we are as close to being in the position that we were pre-Reconstruction as we have ever been. As of December 31st, 2022, I'm going to ask a question. Does anybody in here, have they ever been enrolled for vote by mail or received a ballot at home? Okay. Well, as of December of last year, December 31st, I guarantee you, if you have not re-registered, you are kicked off of that roll. They have made it virtually impossible for you to cast your ballot. So if you have not received, if you received it last year and you have not signed up expressly in this calendar year in 2023, you aren't going to get a ballot in 2024. So, but it's not too late. We'll talk about how that works as we move forward. The Florida legislature right now is made up of, in the Senate, it's a 40-member body. There are 28 Republicans and 12 Democrats. In the House, which is consisted of 120 members, there are 84 Republicans and only 35 Democrats, right? That's what's called a supermajority. Now, what that means for a supermajority is that they have the ability to introduce and pass any legislation without debate, without notice, without, and the ease of guarantee that it passes is virtually 100%, right? If you aren't aware of what that means, let's talk about where we are right now. This year we saw Senate Bill 7050, which greatly restricted the way we register voters. Democratic Party, Republican Party, organizations like NAACP, Movement for Change, they can no longer go up to individuals and say, hey, are you registered to vote? And give them a voter registration form. We can't do that anymore. It has severely impacted us. Now, what that means, you may say, okay, well, there are ways around that. But black community is 5 times more likely to rely on third-party voter registration organizations to register voters than our non-black communities. We also saw the passage and went into law the effect of Senate Bill 1718, which focuses around immigrant communities. Well, some of you may think, oh, well, I'm not an immigrant, I'm okay. But if you've been to the doctor, one of the things that they now ask you that you probably haven't paid attention to, that they now ask you is, are you a U.S. citizen? And they ask you that legally now, right? These are questions that impact all of us. And HB 543, which is the concealed carry law, which now allows individuals to conceal carry without having a permit. Some might say, okay, that's not too big of a deal. But what does that mean, especially for us in this room? Our black men encounters with law enforcement under this law have now increased the amount of fatalities with black men, because the presumption is you have a gun. You didn't have that presumption before. They may have thought it, but now they can legally think that that is the case now. And finally, HB1, or school choice. If you haven't heard this, this is the ability that now every student in the state of Florida is eligible for a voucher. One might think that's an okay thing, but what is that doing? That takes money out of the public education system and puts it into private school. It's not for people like you or myself or those in the community that you know of to receive a private education. It's for rich people to get a benefit and lessen their burden that they pay for private school education. This is the first step in trying to dismantle the public education system. This has been tried in other states, and it's bankrupted their public education system. Now, we talk about what we can do. Mr. Williams talked about making sure we exercise our voice through our vote. I want to talk about where we are here more recently to present day. We saw in 2018 there was a race between Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis here in the state of Florida. That race was decided by only 30,000 votes, which is roughly about 3 people per precinct that needed to vote here in the state of Florida. Right now, we are suffering through a climate where black people are targeted, marginalized, dehumanized, and made to feel like second-class citizens. We fast forward to 2022, we see even more devastating results. We saw here in the state of Florida, DeSantis won by a victory of 20 percentage points, right? Well, some people think, oh, that means that there is popularity in his leadership. No, that's not what that means. That means that more people, specifically people who look like you and I, opted not to vote in last year's election cycle. What does that leave us? That leaves us in the state of turmoil and peril that we're currently faced with right now. Here in Escambia County, if I narrow this down even more to local, black people have a large voting base here in Escambia County, making up about 45% of registered voters. That's countywide, irrespective of party. And 50% of the Democratic Party is black people, are made up of black registered voters. However, last year we only saw 34% of our black registered voters turn out in last year's election cycle, and that's here locally. And of that small percentage of people, only 28% of them were black men. So we've got to take an active and engaged point and position and play a role in this politics. Now, Mr. Williams talked about himself. He's up for re-election in 2024. You also heard from Councilman Wiggins, who's also up for re-election in 2024. We didn't get to, but Commissioner May is also up for re-election in 2024. All of our black electeds here in this city or the Escambia County, except for one, are up for election in 2024. So it's going to be important and vital that we play an instrumental and integral role in making sure that we get out to vote. So what does that mean? That means that not only you need to go out and vote, it means that everybody you know needs to go out to vote. When you go, take 10. Encourage those people to take 10. We can't have what we had last year, where we saw people just opt out of the political process. We're in the fight of our lives. We see right now where our presidential nominees are going to be. More than likely, you'll see it be Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The man has told you he is going to be a dictator. He said that. I'm not interpreting it. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. He said it. He told you what he's going to do. We cannot afford to let ourselves be even further in the peril and state of political disarray that we've got. So that means we've got to play an integral part in voting. Now, I've got cards, and I want to make sure that everybody gets one before we leave here today. In this year alone, 1 million voters thus far in the state of Florida have been removed from the voter rolls. 1 million. Not 100, not 1,000, 1 million. Of that, 60% are, guess what? Take a guess what color they are.
African.
They're black, right? So you might think right now that you're good because you voted last year. That's not necessarily the case. You need to check and make sure that you are still registered to vote and that you're still on what we call the active voter rolls. It's going to be imperative and critical that we make sure we do that. We have, for those who are not familiar with what offices are going to be up for election, of course, we know the president, vice president, and the U.S. Senate for the state of Florida, and we have congressional races that are also running as well. Here locally, you've got Alex Andrade, who currently serves as Florida House Rep for District 2, Michelle Salzman, Doug Broxson. They are your local House and Senate reps for this county. They're all up for re-election. The clerk of court, the sheriff, the property appraiser, the tax collector, and the supervisor of elections, they're all up. The county commissioners for districts 1, 3, and 5 are all up. school board members for District 4 and 5. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about the school board race, because if you haven't noticed, school board has been hot this year, right? We're in the news. The state of Florida is leading the nation in the amount of banned books. Those books represent people that look like you and I. They're being banned at droves. Right now, the law is passed that any book can be challenged based on sexual content. Now, you say, okay, well, maybe you might want to think, okay, maybe we need to look at that. The book doesn't have to have sexual content. They just can say, it's sexual content. There's not a review in the world. It automatically gets pulled. So we can talk about a book about Maya Angelou. They can say, it's sexual content. The book goes. Irrespective of what the content is, it goes. You don't want to have that type of overreach and oversight into your history where you're not being considered as part of American history. We've got city council seats for city council seats 1, 3, 5, and 7. They're all up for election. It is going to be integral that we all play a part in this process and make sure that we get out the vote. I'm also going to put out an appeal. There are not enough of us who are running. If you know people in those areas, send them my way, if they're Democrat, of course. But it is going to be imperative that we get those folks out and see more of an adequate representation. And that representation starts with us here in this room. If you're not clear of what's at stake, I just want to share a couple of bills with you that are up for this next cycle here in the state of Florida, in the Florida House, in this next election cycle, right? I'm sorry, this next legislative session, excuse me. There is HB 49. What that is a bill that will allow children of age between the ages of 15 to 17 to work 40-hour work weeks, giving them the ability, allowing employers to schedule them for 40 hours. Now, what child should have a full-time job? That's what's up right now, right? We've got things right where there is a Senate resolution that is scheduled to be heard to say that no person who is a descendant of enslaved people in the state of Florida should receive reparations. Has anybody heard about this bill? No. That's what I'm saying. They are up and listening to that. So let's be clear. Reparations, although some people, depending on where you fall in it, may think it's important, they're cutting it off before you even have the conversation to say, no, you aren't entitled. And they do so based on a date of December 6th, right when the 13th Amendment was ratified. So anybody, and they pay special attention to the language, so it excludes every person of color, every black person in the state of Florida who has a direct lineage for slavery from being eligible to receive reparations, right? Now, again, I go back to say it's not up for discussion right now, but they're cutting it off at the pass. Right now, there is a bill. We talk about the monuments. You've seen all this work that's gone on in Escambia County to remove some of these Confederate monuments, right? And across the state. They're introducing legislation, this next legislative term, that will replace any monument that has been removed in the state of Florida from January 1st, 2017 up to current date. So just because you know right now that it's removed, they're introducing legislation to put it right back, right? These are the things that you have to know about. And what they're not doing, you don't see anything in our news. You don't hear about it on Channel 3, Channel 5, Channel 10. They're not telling you this stuff because they don't want you to know. They're trying to limit your voice and your vote. And to the point that Mr. Williams said, if your vote wasn't important, they would not be working so hard to make sure that you don't have the opportunity to vote. So I encourage you to please make sure that you exercise your voice, get out to vote. He talked about the primary and general elections. It's not enough, to his point, it's not enough to just say, okay, I'm going to skip the primary and I'm going to vote in the general. You got to vote in both. Why you vote in both? Primary elections, particularly local elections, more often than not are decided in the primary. So when opportunities like Councilman Wiggins, Councilman Broughton, who is a representative of District 5, their elections are decided in the primary. So if you hold off to the general election, it is too late. Your voice has already been stifled and you've had no say in the political process. It is going to be imperative. I cannot stress enough how imperative it is for everybody to be acclimated and ready to go. Right now, in the state of Florida, and I think nationwide, black women are carrying this process. They're carrying the torch. It is now time for us to step up, make sure that we're engaged. I think Escambia County is a unique position because you see a lot of our black electeds at this point in time are men. We've got to make sure that we support those electeds, get them reelected, and then train up people so when they turn out and when they're ready to sit down, there's someone else ready to fill the void. And that's where I come in. It's my job to make sure that we get those folks on the ballot, get them elected, and do everything we can to support the process. We tried to turn here locally, the party from being people that you only see during election cycles. So I know it used to irritate my soul to see a politician come to somebody's church right when it's time for them to be reelected, and you don't see them any other time until the next time they need your vote again, right? That's not the case. What we're trying to do here, we're trying to be community partners. We're trying to make sure that you see us all the time and know that you've got a voice. We're here to help. If you don't know where we are, I'll share. We're on Martin Luther King and Cross Street at MLK. We're there Monday through Friday. You can always reach out. We also need volunteers. It's not only enough to vote. You got to donate some of your time to. What does that look like? Does that mean you got to knock on doors? Whatever it looks like for you, whatever you can do to make sure that you get people out so that we have a successful 2024, that's what I'm asking everybody to do. So I appreciate your time. I'm going to make sure we get these cards. On this card, there's a QR code. It allows you to register to vote. It allows you to register for vote by mail. I want to spend a minute just talking about vote by mail. Everybody in this room should be registered for vote by mail. Now, vote by mail does not mean that you have to vote by mail. It gives you, what I like to say, your plan A. Going in person should be your plan B, because you never know what could happen when you go cast your vote. Right now, again, as I just mentioned, 1 million people were removed from the voter rolls. You could get there and they say, you're not registered to vote, sorry. Then you're stuck with what's called a provisional ballot. Well, we like to say that those provisional ballots count, but people who cure and contest those ballots are looking for ways to get that ballot thrown out. So the best way to make sure you're registered and your voice and your vote counts, sign up for vote by mail. I'm not saying that you have to vote by mail. I'm saying you should just get the ability to do so. If you choose to do it, fine. If you don't, that's great. But again, those are my asks. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here, and have a great day. Sure.
Just like the 2000 election, he done sent me a card showing me all the elections.
Mm-hmm.
So do I assume that I'm an active voter?
If you've gotten a card, so the supervisor of elections has sent out a plethora of cards. The one thing I will say about Escambia supervisor of elections is they're actually pretty decent. They try to make sure that everybody's aware of their voting status, right? So if you've gotten a card talking about upcoming elections, then you should be good. However, there are several things that they've given out earlier. They've given out, if you've got something that's red in color or oranges in color and it says supervisor of elections, that means you're in jeopardy. So you need to call. I've given on this card, I've given the telephone number for the supervisor of elections. The wonderful thing is all this stuff that I'm asking you to do takes maybe 5 minutes, 4 minutes. If you call, it's a 3-minute conversation. They'll re-engage you. If you find yourself not on the active voter roll, they'll re-engage you. You're good to go. You just need to provide them an updated address and your last 4 digits of your social security number, and you're good to go. They are also, after you, this year, or maybe some of you have experienced it last year, you went to go vote and they talked about your signature. They may have made you sign your signature over again. They have a new role where they're taking the signature that's on your driver's license or your state ID card and matching that to how you sign your name when you go vote. If that signature does not match, you will not vote. Again, if that signature does not match, you won't vote. I knew this, and I still had to sign my signature 3 times last year for them to allow me the opportunity to vote. I had to pull out my driver's license and look at it and then do it again. And she's like, okay. There were people last year who were turned away for bad signatures because they didn't know. There's a way around it. You just have to update your signature card with the supervisor of elections. What that means is you just fill out a new voter registration form. I have those. Everybody in here, irrespective of age, whatever, your signature changes. It's never exact. So it is imperative that you have the most up-to-date signature that you have. If it doesn't look right, you can fill out a new voter registration card and literally sign your name with an X. And as long as you duplicate that X when it's time to vote, you're good to go. It does not have to, but it just has to match. It doesn't have to say your full name. Whatever your signature is or you represent as your signature, that's what you have. Any piece of a mail that you get from the supervisor of elections, always read it. Because there's a board that meets monthly that challenges individual voters. That's how these people are removed. We lost from October to December to present day, we've lost here in Escambia County 13,000 registered voters. It's dropped. And again, those people look like you, they look like me. They're not other folks, they look like you and I. So it's going to be imperative that you check your status. Just because you voted last year does not mean you're good to go. The likelihood that you're good to go is probably high, but you always want to check. You just want to check. So does that answer your question, Mr. Wallace?
I'll follow up another thing since you mentioned that. So, let's say for the election, I have injured my hand, my right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I go down there, my hand is injured, so the signature can't be the same.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to allow me to vote. See, that's what I'm saying. I'm just wondering.
So this is,
2 days before the election.
yep, 2 days before the election. The likelihood that they're not going to allow you to vote is high. This is why it's imperative. This is why I say you always have your plan A and your plan B. If that runs the case, you're good to go because you have a vote by mail ballot that you can have and turn that in and get that signed. You can sign it and it will take care of the issue and you can mail it off that way. That's why we always say it's important to have several options the way you vote. You can't just, because I hear it all the time when I tell people to sign up for vote by mail, the number one thing they say is, nope, I don't like to, I don't trust it. I want to go and make sure that my vote counts, so I go in person. You can't guarantee that now, that going in person is going to make sure that your vote counts. It's going to be imperative that you have an option A and an option B. You can always get a provisional But I will tell you, when they look at those provisional ballots, there's always somebody who's going to say, nope, this one shouldn't count because X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and D. And the likelihood that they throw it out is very high. So you want to make sure that you avail yourself of all opportunities to make sure that your voice is heard. And it's going to be critical that you do so. Yes, sir.
Is there a place somewhere, all the stuff that you talked about,
Mhm.
getting amendments or something that they have coming up, where we can find it, or in the upcoming message, who's going and what they're standing for? Is there somewhere?
Yeah, so let me take it in two parts. With the list of bills that they're going to be looking, you can go to the Secretary of State's or the Florida House website or the Florida Senate's website, and they will list all of the bills that they have coming up. You can also reach out to your party. If you're a Democrat, you can come to the Democratic Party. We have a list of everything. If you're a Republican, they have a list of everything that's there as well. And lastly, there are other organizations. There's one, Equal Ground, that a lot of you may be familiar with. We've done a lot of partnering to make sure that they track bills and they have the visibility. We can always get you access to the bills that need to be watched for 2024. That's going to be there. With respect to the individuals that are running, that's going to be dependent upon, so we know who currently is in office, right? The expectation is that most often, not everybody's going to be seeking re-election, but they have to file every year to run for office. So once they file, then we'll have a list of who's going to be running for their respective offices, and then we'll, depending upon the party, I know for Democrats, we will put together a comprehensive list, and we'll have that available either online. We mail it out. We give them out. Last year, we gave out palm cards for people to take to the ballot box, especially when we were talking about those people, Supreme Court justices, things of that nature. Anything that's on the ballot, we have readily in access and available for you. And we'll, throughout this year, or 2024, we'll be going through and sharing with you what is coming up so everybody knows how to vote. We're not going to leave anybody out, in the wind. It's our job to make sure that you're educated on what the amendments and the issues are, so that we'll have access to all that stuff. And if you're still finding it, you can always come to our office. I have cards. I'll make sure I'll leave them out for everybody with our information and my information on there, so that you can have access. I think most people in here know how to reach me or know how to get me or get the telephone number. I'll be more than happy to sit down and talk with people. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Again, we still have a lot of offices that are going to will remain unchallenged in 2024, simply because people aren't wanting to step up and run for the office. You think about the county positions like Board of County Commissioners and those offices, especially, we know I know we're televised, so I'm going to try to say this as easy as possible. There are certain districts that we know are going to be more difficult than others to win, right? And so we're going to do our best to make sure that we get the right candidates to do so. Like right now, we have candidates that are running against what's that man's name? Matt Gaetz. There's already someone who's filed. She's aggressively out there trying to get her name out to make sure she's viable. And right now, Matt Gaetz has given her the fodder because he's turned our national House of Representatives into chaos because they went all that time without a speaker. So we have ways to get it out. And as time goes through, as we get further into 2024, we'll get a better picture and understanding of who's running and how we can best promote them and make sure that they're available for everybody. But I will tell you, my number one role in any of this, I know I talked about not having candidates, but my role and my focus, Mr. Nichols will attest, because he's all on our leadership team for Democratic Party, is I'm focused on us. I'm focused on making sure the candidates who run for office have us in mind. I'm not interested, I say this all the time, I'm not interested in saving Pensacola Beach. I'm not interested in all the stuff that traditionally have been of importance in the past. That's not my focus because we are at stake. And I'm not going to sit here as a black man in a position where I can affect change and worry about stuff that's not important to myself or my community. So that's where we are. The candidates that we have, that we put forth, if you see them on the thing, we're good to go. Because every candidate, irrespective of whether they have a D behind their name or not, won't necessarily be endorsed by the party, if that makes sense. So that's where we are, and that's where we'll go, and hopefully we'll see a change that we need for 2024. Anybody else? All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Now we'll have the remarks coming from Brother Walter Wallace, followed by our pastor, Clifton Riley, who would also give the prayer for the meal, the blessing of the food. Thank you. Mr. Wallace, if you would, please.
You just got to change up the image.
Oh, good morning. First off, I want to give a big hand for our MC, Mr. Nichols, and to our guests. I appreciate you coming. And to all your men, and as president of the Sons of Allen Bethel AME Church, we're really proud that you came. And hopefully that this will not be a one-time event, because we had a stage. The reason we said men's in the community, we had a stage that black men need to start working in the church. We need to start working in our community. And like you see, if you go around and you look at your church and your community, and what you see ladies, women. And then the question is, what happened to our men? The Bible said that man should lead. Where's our leadership? And this is probably one of the best things to me, is for us to come together. You know, not just one time a year, whether it be your church, Bethel, or anybody's church. I encourage you to go back to your church and your community and start your men ministry, where you're doing things active in the community. You're doing active things in the church. But it's time for us to stand up. And like he said, especially for our young men. You know, I tell people, some people, when they see one of our young men on TV going to jail and all that, the question is, what have I done to prevent that? I read an article in the paper, and I've been, over the years myself, mentoring. 1 hour. And it used to be, when I mentored, it used to hurt my heart when some of them kids said, Mr. Wallace, can you get me a mentor? And it's amazing that I can't get one black man to spend 1 hour with a black child. 1 hour out of a whole week. So I just encourage y'all to go back into your church and start your men ministry. And we so appreciate you coming, and hopefully you'll come again. Like I said, hopefully this event is here. Hopefully we can do this again. Not even at Bethel. We'll come to your church. But I actually encourage you to go back to your church and start your men ministry in your church. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to introduce our pastor, Clifton Riley. Also, when you go out, if you like to make a donation, it's a book thing there. Also, on the table, we have the Sons of Allen got some little miniature Bibles, quotation verses. I ask you to take one with you. You want to take a couple of them, pass them out. But it's all about doing Christ's work. And I'd like to introduce our great pastor who's been with us for only his 11th year, Pastor Clifton Riley.
Thank you, Brother Wallace, for that presentation. But I'm so grateful and thankful to God for this event. And I want to thank our brother Charlie Nichols, for presiding so eloquent over this event this morning. And this has been wonderful. I've certainly enjoyed it. Let me thank each of you for coming. And I said to some of the brothers when I came in, they were sitting in the rear, and I said to them, if you will, please come to the front. And so now you can see why your presence was needed at the front. And so we want to thank you. We were expecting more men to come. But nevertheless, those of you who are here, you've made a difference, and we really appreciate it. I want to thank all of our speakers, the politicians, Brother Scott and Brother Williams, and I believe Brother Wiggins. Thank those brothers. And our keynote speaker hadn't been with us that long, but a man, he came this morning. I've been impressed with him from the first day I saw him. And the first day I saw him, he drove, I believe, a Lexus into the parking lot. And I'm saying to myself, that's a pretty nice ride there. So, you know, anybody don't drive a Lexus. But the message he gave this morning. I don't drive a Lexus. You don't drive a Lexus? Mercedes-Benz, excuse me. I don't know where that Lexus come from. Yeah, Mercedes-Benz. Thank you, Doc, for correcting me. But the message he gave this morning, the message about prayer, which was very authentic, is needed. And as the subject of or the theme of our meeting this morning was Brothers United in Community Affairs. And to be united is a powerful word. And as he talked about prayer this morning, prayer and miracles are associated. And he talked about his grandson. And I'm sure all of you all, praying men in here, can say how God answered your prayers. That's a miracle. Yeah, that's a miracle. And short story, my grandson, I had a grandson who was born, and he was premature, weighed about 1.5 pounds. He was very, very small, and didn't even expect the child to live. He stayed in the hospital about 2 months, finally gained enough weight to come home. But the doctor said to my son and my daughter-in-law, this baby can't hear. We need to put hearing aids in his ear, implants. So my son came to me and my daughter-in-law, and I said to them, the baby is quite small right now. Let's give God a chance and see what God will do. And so my family came together, my children, and we came to church. We brought the baby to the altar, and we prayed and asked God to give the baby hearing. And so as he began to grow, and they carried him to child care, my daughter-in-law said one day, the instructor at child care told us, says, this baby can hear. She said, I don't know what they're talking about. This baby can hear. And today, our family stands. We have 10 grandchildren. And this young man is 13 years old. And he don't know what making a B in school is. He's an A student. Kid is sharp. Kid is very highly intelligent. And so God performs miracles. You can't give up on nobody, because if you turn them over to God, God will make a difference. And so I want to thank you all for coming. I heard Brother Wallace, he said, start a Sons of Allen in your church. And it's a men's ministry in our church. But he said, start a men's ministry in your church. You know, the church is universal. Even though you might be Mount Zion, AME, Mount Zion, ZAE, we Bethel AME, but we're one. We're one. And that's what has happened to our community, the black community. We're not one anymore. There was a time in the black community, and I can remember as a boy growing up, you all know that there was what you call the extended family. My daddy brothers would whoop me like my father would. My daddy brothers made me be obedient just like my father would. The neighbors had to be obedient to them as well. But they were visible. They were visible. And so what we're experiencing is black men are not visible. Black men are not available in the church. And when we announced this on last Sunday, the question to me from the ladies, can we come? And if I had said yes, it's probably every chair and it would have been filled to capacity. We know that the women are here, but the men, we need to come together. And as Brother Walt had stated, whatever is going on at your place of worship, we won't say your church, at your place of worship, invite us. We will come because we're stronger together. And moving forward, the black man was created before, the male was created before the woman. And so God has placed upon us leadership responsibility. And so men, we want to thank you today for coming. Again, I've enjoyed all of the speakers. I've enjoyed your presence. And again, Doc, I want to thank you for that wonderful word on prayer. It is so important to pray. So important to pray. So important to pray and to let the younger people see you praying. It's important to pray. My grandmother, every morning when I was a child, she'd wake up singing a hymn, praying, and I'm saying to myself, and I asked her one day, I said, Grandma, who are you talking to? She said, son, I'm talking to the Lord. She said, keep living and you'll understand. And I thank God today that I understand. She was talking to the Lord. Okay. So thank you, man. This has been great. Get it ready now for this wonderful meal that has been prepared for us. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this event. And I want to thank you for Brother Walter Wallace and the Sons of Allen Men's Ministry here at Bethel. Now, Father, as we partake of this food, we thank you for it. Because we realize that there are some today that woke up this morning, did not even have food or know where they were going to get a meal from. But here we are. Here we are. Not so much that we are deserving and that we've been so good, but because of your grace, your mercy, and your love. And now, God, we want to thank you for the food and for the hands that prepared the food, the sharing hands, the caring hands, and the loving hands. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.
Come line up and get your plate, feed yourself.
Everybody stay seated. Stay seated.
You said that, Brother Walter.
I'm coming to you. You got plenty to eat, much as you want, much as you want to drink. So just give me a minute, and I'll come to you, okay? So here, table. Y'all come to me now.
All right.
Right now. If you want to eat, if you don't want to eat, that's fine. Here, table.
We got to clear out plates now. If you want to clear something, okay? We got to clear out plates.
Man, great, man. Thank you, man. Thank you, man. Thank you, man. Thank you, Brother Lance. Thank you, Lance. Don, I don't know where that lecture's came from. I was lectures in my hand. Hey, great message.